Analyzing interpersonal relation. Introduction. Think about yesterday. What out of the total number of hours while you were awake, how much time did you spend all by yourself with nobody around to talk to or deal with? How much time did you spend in a dyadic relationship, that is, with another person? How much time did you devote in a small group into 8 persons? Finally, how much time did you interact with a large group? Chances are high that most of your daily time is spent in some sort of interpersonal situation rather than all by yourself or being just a number of a large group. Most of your daily experiences involve interactions with other human beings. Some such experiences have been quite joyful, resulting into relationships which have flourished over time. Some experiences have hurt you, upset you, resulting in relationships which have remained stagnant or have worsened or have even been abandoned. Understanding how and why these have happened to you will help you develop and improve your relationships with others. You are likely to feel more competent in interpersonal situations and be happier. Your interpersonal competence refer to the degree to which you are accurately aware of your impact on others and of impact of others on you. It is your ability to engage in any mutually helpful relationship. It enables you to achieve your personal goals as well as task goals in the organizations where you are a member. What are the effects of your interpersonal competence on your managerial behavior? Interpersonally, incompetent managers create an organizational environment in which members act very defensively to protect their own interests. Since everybody acts defensively in the organization where roles and relationships are basically interdependent, neither the personal goals of the member nor the task goals can be fully realized. Problems are not confronted and are kept hidden from each other for fear that exploding the problems will only aggravate the situation. In course of time, issues which were avoided and swept under the rug assume gigantic proportion and overwhelmed the members. On the other hand, interpersonally competent managers allow their subordinates to challenge their views and to question the organization's norms, policies, rules, and objectives. When these kinds of behaviors are tolerated, peoples are likely to discover problems and commit themselves to their situations. Organizational effective increases. Organizational effectiveness increases. Your role in the organization can be viewed as a central role surrounded by at least three other types of roles: superiors, colleagues, and subordinates. Beside these three types of roles, you may have to interact with a lot of other people from different positions: consumers, suppliers, people from regulatory agencies, general public, etc. Interactions with different interest group demand different types of specific skills and competencies. Possessions and understanding of these skills may not guarantee successful human relations, but it can increase your interpersonal sensitivity and help you to take appropriate action to improve relationships. But remember, any attempt to improve interpersonal competence must begin with knowing oneself more accurately. Understanding the determinants of interpersonal behavior. Self concept. What am I? Mankind is unique because only a human being has the capacity of thinking about high himself, and this attitude comprises the self and self concept. The self concept has three aspects: belief, feelings, and behaviors. The belief component represents the content of the self. This is illustrated by such thoughts as I am intelligent, sociable, sincere, overweight, etc. The feeling component about one's self is reflected is in feeling of self-worth, or in general as I am okay, I am not okay. Finally, the behavioral component is the tendency to act towards one's self in a deprecating, self-enhancing manner. Your self concept is a relationship of all your past experiences with other persons, and includes characteristics with distinguish you from others. Once your self concept is established and specific patterns of behavior are adopted, it tends to resist change. This resistance to change also gives you a degree of stability that prevents you from regarding yourself as worthless at one moment and worthy at the next. As your activity are organized and integrated in relations to your self concept, you can expect to develop a relatively consistent lifestyle. Also, you achieve a stable interpersonal environment by maintaining a consistent relationship between your self concept and your beliefs about how others behave and feel towards you with regards to your self concept. In order to maintain your interpersonal environment and to maximize congruence or harmony, you, like any other individual, actively use certain mechanisms to stabilize interactions, and some of them are: first, misperception. When the actual expectations of others are not congruent with your self concept or behavior, you may simply misperceive how others see you. Second, selective interactions. You may choose to interact with those persons with whom you can most readily establish a congruent state. Third is selective evaluation of the other person. You maximize congruency by favorably evaluating those who behave congruently towards you and devaluate those who do not. Fourth is selective evaluation of self. You maximize congruency by altering the values places on various aspects of your self concept so that the aspects that are in agreement with the perception of your own behavior and those of others are more most likely evaluated. Fifth, response evocation. You intentionally or unintentionally behave in a way that results in others' behavior towards you in a congruent fashion. A person in interactions control the cues provided to others to ensure that he or she will be categorized in certain ways and not in any unexpected way. The mechanism we discussed above are some of the means used by any person to protect one's self concept and maintain an interpersonal environment. Interpersonal needs. What do you want from me? People need people, but not what? People needs people, but for what? Skulls 1966 maintains that there are three interpersonal needs: inclusion, control, and affection that cause one to establish and maintain relations with others. These needs are defined as follows. First, inclusion, the need for interaction and association. Second, control, the needs for control and power. Third, affection, the needs for love and affection. Individuals differ, however, in the strength of their interpersonal needs. For each interpersonal needs, there are two behavioral aspects expressed and wanted. Expressed behavior is the behavior that we initiate towards others, and wanted behavior is the behavior we want or prefer from others towards us. Compatibility is a properly of a relationship between two or more persons that leads to a mutual satisfaction of interpersonal needs and harmonious coexistence. If what is wanted and what is expressed is equal for both interacting persons, mutual needs are satisfied. For example, those who wish to dominate and control activities work well with those who wanted to be controlled or directed. However, if both parties want to dominate, some degree of conflict may be expected. When you compare these interpersonal needs with self concept, you will find that the need for inclusion is to feel that the self is significant and worthwhile. For control, the needs is to feel one's self as a competent and responsible person. For affection, the needs is to feel that self is a lovable person. Interpersonal orientations, how do you influence me? Individuals vary greatly in how they relate to and influence others. These three basic types of persons have been identified: the tough bearer, the friendly helper, and the objective thinker. These three styles and associated behavior are outlined in chart 1. The interpersonal orientations are shown in terms of extremes, but they are typically descriptions of familiar behavior. Many people are more oriented to one style than another and feel more comfortable with the associated behavior. While one's style is related to his or her personal needs and self control, a style can be overdone and distorted. Each style reflects behavior that, in varying degrees, ineffective ineffective in some situation. The tough battler would refer better to others if he or she were more sensitive to others, could accept his or her inevitable dependence on others, and recognize that some situations will not yield to pressure. The friendly helper would be more satisfied if he or she could stand for his or her own interest and face conflict. Likewise, the objective thinker could relate to others more effectively if he or she were more aware and accepting of his or her own feelings and those of others. One does not have to assume that his or her behavior is fixed or impossible to control. Interpersonal attractions. Why do we like each other? You are not passive in your interpersonal interactions with others but seek to structure these relationships. You will choose to interact with others with whom you can most readily establish a harmonious relationship. For example, if you regard yourself as very intelligent, you will interact with others who respect your intelligence or allow you to use it. By choosing such persons as friends, an important and durable source of harmonious interactions is created. So remember, people interact more frequently with those who are perceived as conforming their self concept to the greatest extent. The greater the importance and common consequences of an object for two people, the greater the attraction between both person and an object may refer to any focus of perception, including physical objects, symbols, the other person's self concept, or to one's own self concept. The attractions of A towards B is affected by similarly between A's attitude towards X and his or her perception of B's attitude towards X. Moreover, A's own attitude towards X is and his own her perceptions of B's attitude are influenced by the degree of which he or she is attracted to B. For example, assume that A, who is attracted to B, discovered a difference between A's and B's attitude towards their common supervisor X. Assume that A likes the supervisors but B does not and holds any unfavorable views about him. Since A is attracted to B, even while holding divergent views, a strain is created but must be resolved. Return to a state of balance may take several forms. First is a shift in A's perception of B's attitude may occur. A may decide that he or she was mistaken in attribute to B and negative attitude towards the superior. If B actually does have a negative attitude, this would be misperception. Second, A might change his or her own attitude in the direction of B and develop a negative attitude towards the supervisor X. Third, A might try to conceive B or B is mistaken about the supervisor. If B is attracted to A and is also experiencing a strain, B might be susceptible to such persuasion. Fourth, A might restore balance to the relationships by reducing his or her attraction towards B. This action indicates how people seek to validate their attitudes by seeking agreement with others' consensual validation. When a group begins to interact and acquire information of others' views and attitudes, bonds of attraction form most strongly between those who hold similar value views towards things that are important and relevant to both. Also, a person likes others who have the same feeling towards him or her as that person has towards himself or herself. This reinforces one's self concept and facilitates interpersonal relations. Developing interpersonal relationship. The development of successful working relationship takes time. No one can cultivate such a relationship with another person without going through a long, arduous process that usually takes months or years to develop. The development of a working relationship occurs in the following sequence. The initial contact process produces a set of impressions and attitudes in each towards the other. A favorable mutual impressions is needed to develop a long term relationship. Second is a possible impression opens the door for a long term working relationship. When this occurs, the interacting parties develop a set of mutually agreeable expectations regarding their roles, performance, and relationships. Third is the interacting parties makes continuous attempts to meet each other's expectations. Failures to carry out this psychological contract will probably terminate the relationship. Fourth is mutually trust and influence develop as a result of meeting the psychological contract, and this ensures the continuation of the relationship. In this section, we are going to discuss in brief the four stages of developing interpersonal relationship. In that four stages, first is forming firm impressions. Second is developing mutual expectations. Third is honoring psychological contacts. And the fourth is developing trust and influence. We'll know about the first in brief. Forming first impression. First impression through thou after inaccurate are lasting impressions. First impressions are lasting because they influence the way in which people see subsequent data about the perceived object on or person. So whether or not first impression are correct, it is important for us to make favorable impressions on other people. Initial impressions do not guarantee long term relationships, but they are essential for entering into enduring relationship with others. Many studies have shown that much of groundwork for subsequent relationship with others is laid in the very first stage of socialization. The first stage of socialization has a significant implication for those who are looking for jobs. When an organization searches for a new manager, it will probably contact between 10 to 40 potential candidates. For of these, it will probably interview between 3 to 8 people, but only one will be selected for the position. What factors help to employer to narrow down the list? The initial selection is probably based on substantive qualities such as education, achievement, job experience, and specialization references, etc., as described in the resume. But the next selection most likely result from the impression the candidate makes during the job interview. Image consultants list the following qualities which help make a good first impression. Thompson 1977. First is poise. One should maintain composure by being diplomatic and personable. Personable nervousness disturb one's poise. Second is articulation. One should speak naturally and fluently, use proper language, and add deep tones in the voice to create an impression of maturity. Third is conservative dress. Conservative dress in classic styles are appropriate for a business engagement such as job interview. Extremes in fashion should be avoided. Fourth is positive attitude. Without being a naive optimist, one should show the positive outlook towards life. For people generally prefer a prudent optimist to a pessimist. Fifth is knowledgeability. Learning something about the organization and its product, services, and the people before an interview demonstrates one's interest. Sixth is thoughtfulness. One should be alert and responsive, yet wait each question before responding. A hasty response can be seen as indicative of immaturity or lack of wisdom. Seventh is self confidence. In order to make other people have confidence in him or her, the person needs to appear self confident. An erect posture, held high, and an assertive tone of voice can help show self confidence with requisite humility. Remember that in forming first impression, your non-verbal behavior plays an important role as your verbal behavior. Read the theme paper of transactional analysis and you will appreciate that the body language associated with different ego state like like nurturing parents, adults, adapted child, and natural child play a very important role in the process of exchanging of positive strokes to each other. Developing mutual expectations. When people are mutually impressed, they are more likely to enter into a long term relationship. When this happens, they develop certain expectations about each other. In work organizations, managers may expect new employees to be competent, productive, reliable, and loyal, and to conform to organizational norms. New employees, on the other hand, expect their superiors to be fair, supportive, and considerate of their needs. Many of these expectations are unwritten and unspoken. People usually do not have clear ideas about what they expect from other people or from organizations, especially in the beginning of the relationships. Initial expectations are mutually very general to tend to be unrealistic. Unrealistic expectations often develop because people promises more than they can deliver at the initial stage in order to impress the other party. Parties must go beyond the stage of establishing general expectation in order to determine whether or not the relationship is satisfactory. Unless they work out more realistic expectations, the relationship becomes superficial and less meaningful. The process of working out mutual expectations involves a series of exchanges and adjustment to each other's expectations. A set of mutual expectations that is worked out and understood by the parties is called a psychological contract. It governs the relationships between them in day to day interactions. Although this contract is neither formally stated or legally binding, it serves as a basis for evaluating the quality of the relationship. Honoring psychological contracts. An effective interpersonal or work relationship cannot develop and be maintained unless the participants are willing to honor their psychological contracts. Each party expects the other to be faithful in the relationship, not to take arbitrary actions, and to be honest with him or her. There will be, of course, be times when some of these expectations cannot be fully satisfied. But when this happens, each party must be reassured that the other is acting in good faith. What do people expect from others in working relationship? In one study, Gabaro 1978, executives expected three things from their colleagues: reliable character, professional competence, and good judgment. The character based expectations include: first is integrity, maintaining personal and moral honesty in the relationship. Second is motive, having good intentions and acting in good faith. Third is consistency, showing consistency in behavior. Fourth is openness, leveling and being honest with another person. And fifth is discretion, maintaining confidence. The competence based expectation includes technical competence, which is having the ability to perform the assigned task, and the next is interpersonal competence, which is being able to maintain effective interpersonal relationships. And the judgment based expectation includes: first is business sense, making good business judgment, and second is interpersonal judgment, making an accurate perceptual judgment of other people. Each of us has a minimum acceptable level of satisfaction. If the actual fulfillment of expectation is below that level, the situation will be viewed A to A violation of the contract. When this happens, the affected number will be send out signals of dissatisfaction in the form of joking, complaining, or showing anger, sometimes without withdrawal. If these signals are received and honored by the other person, the relationship can be restored, or the contract may be renegotiated. renegotiated. Otherwise, the association will suffer chronic discontent, strife, alienation, and eventual termination. Developing trust and influence. The result of meeting the psychological contract is an increased level of trust and influence. When the parties to the contract are able to meet their mutual expectations, the relationship produces mutual trust and favorable sentiments. The more satisfactory the associations becomes, the greater the influence the parties have on each other. Since the relationship is fulfilling, the parties will continually rely on it to satisfy their needs. This dependency permits them to exert influence on each other. The increased level of influence enhanced the each party's ability to affect the behavior and thinking of the others. When a person is able to influence others, the person becomes more effective in performing a task. The person's effectiveness is especially increased when the task requires a high degree of interactions with other people, for the influential person is capable of enlisting the necessary support and cooperation from others. Developing interpersonal skills. The quality of interpersonal relationship is largely affected by the way the parties relate to each other. How we relate to another person reflects our own personality, as you have seen earlier. Some people have the greater desire to maintain close relationship. Others are relatively insensitive, but the ability to create, develop, and maintain such relationship is not inborn. More often than not, this ability involves the way a person listens, questions, cares, and responds to others. In order to develop a close and binding relationship, parties must expose themselves to each other so they can really get to know each other. Unless they know each other well, they cannot developing a trusting relationship. Increasing interpersonal awareness. The Johari window. The Johari window is a conceptual model of studying interpersonal awareness. It was developed by Joseph Luft and Harry Ingham. The name Johari combines their first names. It is a semantic model that shows how people expose themselves to others and receive feedback from others to in their interpersonal relationship. As the Johari window has four parts: arena, blind spot, closed, and dark. Arena represents the public self and is known to the self and others. The blind spot area is known to others but not to the self. The closed area is private self, which is known to the self but not to the others. The dark area is neither known to the self nor to the others. The dark area is neither known to self nor to others. The implication of this model is that if arena is very small, there is very little free and spontaneous interactions. On the other hand, the larger the arena, the greater the chance for participants in any relationship to make correct perceptual judgment about each other. This accurate perceptual judgment helps them to develop realistic mutual expectations. Meeting these expectations increases their level of trust and influence, and it helps them maintain a mutually satisfying relationship. As arena expands, the closed area or private self shrinks, and it becomes less necessary to hide or deny things one knows the feels. The blind spot takes longer to reduce because self concept protection mechanisms are involved. Arena can be expanded by means of self disclosure and feedback. These two variables are shown as two large arrows in the figure and range from less to more. Self disclosure means revealing oneself to another person and sharing one's own feelings, emotions, facts, and knowledge with that individual. Self disclosure is an act of showing respect for and sharing intimacy with another person. Such an act requires trust in another person and is likely to encourage the another person to follow suit. But self confidence involves both rewards and costs being open. More self disclosure offers the possibility of self understanding, growth, and better interpersonal adjustments. On the other hand, when we disclose ourselves to another, we are taking the risk of being rejected, misinterpreted, or shortchanged. However, unless someone takes the risk and initiate self disclosure, the relationship will not develop. Feedback reduces the blind spot area and helps us increase our self awareness since we often do not know how others views us. We can guess how they see us by their reactions, but these reactions are often not clear and likely to be misperceived. Unless we receive feedback as to how they see us or what kind of effects our behaviors have on them, we are likely to be blind to their feelings and reactions. The feedback given by others can hope to reduce his blind spot only if it has the following characteristics. Anderson 1970. First is intended to help the recipients. Second is given directly with real feelings and based on the foundations of trust between the giver and the receiver. Third is descriptive rather than evaluative. Fourth is specific rather than general with goods, clear, and preferably recent examples. Fifth is given at a time when the recipient appears to be in a condition of readiness to accept it. Sixth is checked with the others to be sure that they support its validity. Seventh is includes only those things that the recipient might be expected to be able to do something about. Eighth is does not include more than the recipient can handle at any particular time. Interpersonal awareness can be increased in several ways. When you feel that something is wrong with the relationship but the problem area cannot be identified, you may take one from the following actions. First is ask the other party how the relationship is working out for him for her. That is solicit feedback. Takes the initiative in expressing your concerns and feelings, that is initiate self disclosure and listen and listen and listen to the feedback with empathy and without any attempt to defend. The feedback obtained may be not satisfactory but at least opens the door for improvement. Second is ask yourself whether you are fulfilling the psychological contract. Take stock of your perceptions of mutual expectations and see if each of you is meeting these expectations. Keeping in mind the characteristics of effective feedback, communicate your concerns to your partner. Taking interpersonal risks. Nothing really happens in a relationship until the participants learn to trust each other. However, trusting another person is not simple because it involves risk of being exploited. If the person if the other person behaves in such a manner that it violates one's trust in him or her, the relationship cannot continue. However, we do not know if we can trust another person until such a opportunity of violation of trust arises. There are few things a person can do to create and maintain the trusting relationship. First is takes the initiative in self disclosure. This can set the terms of developing and maintaining a relationship of trust. Accepting another person's self disclosure. Appreciate the other persons for taking the initiative and the risk of rejection. Third is reciprocate another's initiative with your own self disclosure. Failure to do so will be interpreted by the other person's a lack of interest and will arouse the anxiety of possible exploitation. Fourth is remember that the self fulfilling prophecy works in an interpersonal relationship. An initial assumption about the person has the weight of proving itself. If you assume that the person cannot be trusted, you will find evidence to that effect. If you assume that the person can be trusted, you are likely to experience the same. Developing cooperative relationships or relationships will be maintained and will prosper only when it satisfies the participants' needs and expectations. In a mutually helpful relationship, the participants tend to cooperate rather than compete in sharing limited resources or rewards. In work organization, people compete the limited resources, pay increases, promotions, power and recognitions. But those who want to develop mutual harmful relationships with others should make an effort to cooperate rather than compete in such situations. However, development of cooperative relationships in a function of three factors. First is shareable goals, the perception that the goal is shareable by the parties. In all interdependent relationships, this there exists at least one superordinate goal with can be achieved only if the parties cooperate. Second is perceived power of all parties, the perception that all parties have power enough to use in a benevolent or a malevolent manner, developing depending upon their individual choices. These factors refers to the appreciation of the fact that anybody in a relationship has the power to help or hinder goal achievement. Third is trust. The a minimal level of trust prevailing amongst the parties that power of the other party will not be used in malevolent way. The present level of trust is a product of past experience and self-fulfilling prophecy. The more trusting the parties becomes, the more likely is that they will engage in cooperative relationships in future. Resolving interpersonal problems. A close interpersonal relationship is maintained by building trust, acceptance, and support. But there are times when one party may becomes angry with the others for failing to meet the psychological contract. When this occurs, the first party should constructively confront the second. How will the two handle such a interpersonal problems will indicate the depth of the relationships. In a shallow relationship, one party may ignore the destructive behavior of the others, but in the mature relationship, however, both parties should engage in constructive confrontation confrontation in order to improve the quality of the relationship. Constructive confrontation is defined by Johnson 1972 as a deliberate attempt to help another person examine the consequences of his or her behavior. It involves providing feedback that is useful and untethering and unthreatening to the confrontee, keeping in mind the characteristics of giving feedback as discussed earlier. You can improve the effectiveness of confrontation by observing the following principles. First is importance of the relationship. Do not confront another person unless both parties see the importance of the relationship and truly value it. Otherwise, confrontation may turn into or be perceived as criticism. Second is ability of the confrontee. Confront another person only when you perceive the he or she has the ability to act on your feedback. If the confrontee cannot change his or her behavior, confrontation can lead to frustration. 3. Use of empathy. View the problems from the confrontee's perspective. You may even change your perception of problems as the result of this empathy. Fourth is use of I language. Use I language such as the word I, me, and my to reduce the defensiveness of the confrontee. You language you use of you and your is more closely related to criticism and sermonizing. Fifth is focusing on behavior. Focus your behavior on specific behaviors rather than on the person. We have a person directed feedback produces defensive behavior and the retainment. We can change our behavior but not ourselves. Sixth is use of descriptive statement. Describe how you see and feel about the situations. Evaluating in judgment statements can easily evoke defensive behaviors because such statements can be interpreted as criticism. Seventh is exploring alternative behaviors. Instead of suggesting any specific solution to the problems, help the person explore various means of overcoming it. Eighth is selection of time. Since timing is important for an effective confrontation, select a time when a confrontation is relaxed and more open to receiving feedback without being defensive. Ninth is importance of privacy. Confront the person in private. Open confrontation will be considered a personal attack rather than a helpful encounter. Tenth is use of non-verbal behavior. Use non-verbal behaviors which speak louder than words to express yourself to others. Eye contact, appropriate tone of voice, and correct posture can all add to the effectiveness of confrontation. Summary of analyzing interpersonal relations. In this unit, we have discussed the importance of interpersonal competence, which is at the heart of social skills required by any manager in any organization. You have seen that in order to improve interpersonal competence, you must have a fairly accurate idea about one's self concept. Self concept, once formed, resists change through several protective mechanisms. Three types of interpersonal needs, that is inclusive, control, and affection, are related with self concept, but these have two behavioral aspects: expressed and wanted. Concepts of interpersonal orientations tell us how we influence each other. In that section you will see You have seen that three basic types of persons have been identified: the tough battler, the friendly helper, and the objective thinker. The concept of interpersonal attractions tell us why we like each other. You have seen that people interact more frequently with those who are perceived as confirming their self-confidence, self-concept to the greatest extent. Bonds of attraction from most strongly between those who hold similar views towards things that are important and relevant to both. In this unit, we have discussed four stages of development of our working relationships. The first stage of socialization is forming the initial impressions. Initial favorable impressions do not guarantee long-term relationship, but they are initial for entering into enduring relationship with others. In forming first impression, non-verbal behavior plays an important role, a role as verbal behavior. In the second stage, a set of mutual expectations are worked out and understood by the parties. Many of these expectations are unwritten and unspoken. Hence, these are called psychological contracts. An effective interpersonal or work relationships cannot develop unless the participants are willing to honor their psychological contracts. The result of fulfilling the psychological contract is an increased level of trust and influence. In the last section on developing interpersonal skills, you have come across a conceptual model called Johari window. You have seen that interpersonal competence can be greatly exchanged by enlarging arena with the help of feedback and self-disclosure. Several characteristics of effective feedback have been discussed. It is also emphasized that interpersonal relations cannot flourish unless the parties are prepared to take certain interpersonal risks. Development of cooperative relationship is facilitated when there are shared goals, mutually perceived powers, and the minimum level of distrust. Finally, we have discussed the principles of constructive confrontation in resolving interpersonal problems.